Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics. The political landscape is emerging from the results of the Republic's local election. What will they and the European results later this week tell us about the battle for power between Sinn Féin and the government parties? We'll be getting the latest from the RDS in Dublin, and we'll hear from Fine Gael live in the studio. Plus, the shock news about the social housing budget.
Once again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm quite shocked in relation to the house build figures. Gravely concerned.
And with his analysis of that and the latest in our own election campaign, I'm joined by the Press Association's Ireland editor, David Young. It's a busy programme today, and we begin with election results in the Republic and what they might mean for a general election there. Local election results are being counted, with the Europeans to get underway soon. One of the big news lines emerging is the performance of Sinn Féin. Having polled strongly for years and with expectations of significant gains, the leadership is now downbeat. Here's its finance spokesman, Pearse Doherty, speaking to RTE last night.
It's not the result we hoped for, and indeed there'll be a lot of disappointment with some of our new candidates that were trying to break new ground. But look, it's been a tough election. The key thing is that there's strong indicators as well coming from the three constituencies, the three European constituencies, and there's a lot to play for, both in that election and also many of the local elections yet, when we see where the transfers will go. So I think people very clearly, when we're having the conversations on the door, they're talking about change, they want change, and clearly they want a change of government. I think people are sophisticated enough, they know the difference between a local European election and a general election. And David, we've been here before. I think we've had this conversation 5 years ago, maybe myself and yourself as well, where we had a disappointing election at that time. Yet 9 months later, we were seeing some of our candidates who lost out actually being elected as TDs. So the key thing for us is we had the conversations with people on the doorsteps. We need to listen to those. We'll come back now, dust ourselves down, no matter what the results are. We know that we're determined to deliver change in this country. We need to communicate our message very clear to the people.
Pearse Doherty talking last night. Let's go live to the Count Centre in Dublin now and join our reporter there, Aoife Moore. Aoife, welcome to the programme. I wonder what you think has happened to Sinn Féin. Too many candidates, support going elsewhere or not coming out? And Pearse Doherty, interestingly there, talking about the need to listen to the people, and that's perhaps an inference that the party hasn't been listening.
Yeah, I just want to apologise at the outset for the noise behind me. We're in a very busy RDS at the moment. But yeah, as you said, Pearse Doherty last night saying that the party would listen to the people, they would dust themselves down. I believe that's actually the same phrase that Mary Lou McDonald used in 2019 when they were in this almost exactly the same position. And we've just heard David Cullinan, the Sinn Féin health spokesperson, a very senior Sinn Féin TD, saying almost exactly the same thing on RTE radio this morning. It does very much appear, and it appeared from the early boxes being opened here at the RDS, that something had happened to the Sinn Féin vote. Now, we knew that they were polling very close to Fine Gael in the last couple of days, but it appeared when we got then to the tally, when we were looking at the tallies, there appeared to be some differences in that the Sinn Féin candidates weren't transferring to each other, especially in Europeans. Now, Sinn Féin's polling has gone down over the last couple of months, from those highs that we saw last year up in the early 30s down now to the early 20s, and that is a lot to do with the policies that we're hearing. People are saying, they're very fraught arguments about immigration, the housing crisis and everything else, but there had been a feeling of kind of panic in the Sinn Féin camp yesterday here in the RDS, and I think the big story of the weekend will be the independents, how well the independents have done. Fine Gael perhaps taken over from Fianna Fáil, but there will be questions for Mary Lou McDonald come Monday about what happened in these council elections.
Well, for sure, but I suppose senior figures in Sinn Féin would say the result was bad in 2019 and the party bounced back, and the party again will do everything it can to make sure that it bounces back this time as well.
Yeah, and what they'll say, they've 81 councillors at the minute. They will claim 82 as a victory because it's an improvement on 2019. But I think what they will be criticising on is the potential for what they could have gotten, and what they'll be asked what is due to the slide. David Cullinan on RTE today was being seriously questioned about if the housing and health crisis is so bad at the minute, why are Sinn Féin not able to capitalise on that? And he said, you know, we are making gains in places like Monaghan, they make gains in places like Waterford and those council elections. But it does very much appear that they have, in these early tallies anyway, maybe perhaps run too many candidates. And there will be questions for the leadership of Mary Lou McDonald. But as you say, she will say, we will build on this and we'll head into the general election with all those problems they consistently talk about, you know, in health and housing. But, you know, I think anyone would be a fool to think there won't be serious concerns about Mary Lou McDonald and her performance in the last two local elections.
Well, if that's the case, and if Mary Lou McDonald is likely to come under pressure in terms of her future leadership of the party, have we potentially just heard from her successor on this programme, Pearse Doherty?
Far be it from me to make any predictions about Sinn Féin, but from what everyone else is saying and what we're reading in media reports is that there will be questions asked. There are people unhappy in the party, and they were unhappy last night here in the RDS, and they were telling journalists that they were unhappy. You know, in 2019, Mary Lou McDonald, that was her first election as leader. They did not perform well. This is her second local election as leader. They are not performing the way they thought they were going to perform. So there will be questions, whether it's Pearse Doherty. I'm sure there's plenty of people within Sinn Féin who think they'd be great at that job, but I don't personally think, from an analytical point of view, Mary Lou McDonald is going anywhere anytime soon, but she will be feeling the pressure, I think, in the next couple of days.
OK, just finally and very briefly, if you would, Aoife, there's a lot of chat that this might mean that the government parties are keen to bring a general election sooner rather than later. Do you think we could now be looking realistically at the autumn rather than this Parliament running its full term to March next year?
I mean, it makes sense. You know, Simon Harris is now the Taoiseach. In Fine Gael are looking set to be the largest party in local government. It would be a good time for Simon Harris if he wanted to announce that general election, because even if you think people would say, oh, they want to do a giveaway budget in order to kind of bring the voters to them, but you know, when it comes to the popularity, even that might give Sinn Féin enough time to build up that support again, because of the housing crisis doesn't seem to be abating anytime soon. So I think there will be, as I said, there'll be questions within Fine Gael as well about whether a general election might be better sooner rather than later. I think there'll be a lot of taking stock, but I think there'll be plenty of people in Fine Gael, and they will publicly be saying that they would like to see a general election maybe this year instead of March next year when it has to be called.
OK, Aoife Moore in Dublin, thanks very much indeed. Well, Aoife set it up perfectly, because I'm joined now by Senator John McGahan from Fine Gael. Well, let's take that question. Welcome to the programme. Thanks very much indeed for driving up to join us today. Does this set of results so far suggest that the government parties are going to want to bring that election forward and not run till March of next year?
No, I think it's hard to tell. The Taoiseach Simon Harris has been very, very clear that when he took over, he wants this government to go the full term. The latest a general election in Ireland could be constitutionally is in and around the 22nd of March 2025. Micheál Martin has said the same thing. So I look at this. We have to be very clear about these results. This has been a very good day for Fine Gael. It's been a very good day for Fianna Fáil. It's been a good day for the government as a whole. But that doesn't mean we just cut and run and decide to go to the country straight away.
Well, why would you give Sinn Féin time to recover?
Well, I don't know if they will recover or not.
Why would you take that chance?
Well, because we have a very good message to sell. We've been doing a very good job in government for the last 4 years in pretty unprecedented circumstances. And we still have a job of work to do. We have a mandate for 5 years. We still have things that we need to do. We're going very well in housing. We've turned a real corner. We still have another 10 months there to go with that. So I just think we have had a very good day, but it's nothing to be shouting from the rooftops. We still have a job to do. We still have a very good message to sell to the Irish people about this government, why this government should be re-elected. And I think based on these local election results, we have a good opportunity to do that. But I would point out 5 years ago, Sinn Féin had one of their worst election results imaginable. They had councillors who lost their seats who were elected TDs 7 months later. A lot can change. Yeah. We have a body of work to do. We want to get on with the business of government. We're the adults in the room when it comes to the Irish government, and we have a job to do for the Irish people.
Very strange things seem to be happening at the moment, and it's worth just sending out the health warning that obviously this is a very early stage in the count. There are an awful lot of councillors still to be returned, and we haven't got into the serious business yet of the European results. But there's been a lot of talk of some evidence of transferring by voters between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. If you know anything about Irish politics over the last 100 years, you would know that that is extremely unusual.
Yeah,
there are odd things happening that you could never have predicted a couple of years ago.
And I did it myself. I voted Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Green Party. That's how I voted in my local election ballot paper. I think a lot of other government parties will be doing the same, whether it's the Greens or whether it's Fianna Fáil, because we are
But you're
working...
not an average voter, with respect. You're a member of a party, you're a member of the Oireachtas.
Yeah, but in terms of the core vote of, say, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party, I think that's going to be quite transfer friendly, because the three parties are working quite well in government. And I think we will see that as transfers come into play later on this day. And when you look at some of the results that Fine Gael have gotten around the country, like take Dublin, for example. Like, we have a 22-year-old there, Luke Corkery, about to win a seat in Swords that Fine Gael haven't won since 2009. Take Cabra, Mary Lou's back garden, where Sinn Féin ran 4 candidates. We've topped the poll there. And we're on verge to take 2 seats with Gail Ralph and Colin O'Rourke. And I'll make one other final point. The North Inner City, a historically very tough part for Fine Gael. Ray McAdam, a councillor since 2009, has topped the poll for Fine Gael. That's in Mary Lou McDonald's backyard. So if that's happening in their backyard, in their flagship constituencies, take Louth, another flagship constituency. Fine Gael have 5 seats. It's looking like we're going to take 7. Sinn Féin were meant to gain 4 seats. They've completely flatlined. They're going to stay where they are. So what has clearly happened here is the Fine Gael vote has held up very well and actually gone a little bit better. The same with Fianna Fáil, and Sinn Féin have completely flatlined and have not made any of the gains they're expected to make. And the final thing I would say is, I just think when I look at it that, you know, this idea of being all things to all people, it has an expiry date, it has a shelf life. You can't go in on Monday and say you're for this and Tuesday you change your mind. That expiry date has come for Sinn Féin now.
Okay, should just point out for the benefit of people watching at home that we did ask, obviously, Sinn Féin to take part in the programme today, but as you can see, nobody was made available. I mean, you're talking about growth. I've got figures in front of me. I don't want to get bogged in statistics, but as of close of play last night, certainly the Fine Gael vote was down, 1.5% on 2019. So it depends how you define growth. I want to talk about some of the issues that are likely to be significant in the months ahead. Housing, obviously, but particularly immigration. That has obviously been an issue for some of the independents who've been running in this campaign and seem to have done well in the council election. It is a fluid issue. It is one that is hard to control. It is an emotive issue, and it is something that could turn, as far as your party, Fianna Fáil, and potentially the Greens are concerned.
Yeah, and while it's too early to make any assessments of it, what I would feel, and again, this is anecdotal, and this is what I've seen from canvassing in my hometown over the last 6 months, is that there were a large number of core Sinn Féin voters, people who have always voted for Sinn Féin, who stayed at home, who didn't go out and vote. And a lot of them referenced immigration as the reason behind that. Again, I would give you an example. The Irish Freedom Party, who are quite a racist party, who are very anti-immigrant, in Dundalk Town, in one area, they've got over 500 votes. That was in former very strong Sinn Féin areas. So it's very clear that Sinn Féin are taking a hit in those areas from anti-immigrant candidates.
Yeah, that's a party that wouldn't describe itself as a racist party, of course, but the broader point that you're making about where it's drawing its vote from may well stand. How do you think this is going to end up as far as the European elections are concerned? Just a quick look ahead to that. Yeah,
very briefly. Midlands Northwest, I think we're on course to take 2 seats. And the reason is because we have a very strong incumbent in Maria Walsh and we have a very strong new candidate in Nina Carberry. Again, the sample polling in Louth, for example, Michelle Gildernew got about 18% in County Louth. Nina Carberry got 17%. So from a Fine Gael perspective, we have a very good vote strategy, either west and east of the Shannon, and our vote is holding up very well in both those areas. Regina Doherty's going to win a seat in Dublin, and we're doing very well in Munster with Sean Kelly as well.
Really appreciate you taking the time, because I know it's a busy day for you to come up and join us on the programme today. Senator John McGahon from Fine Gael, thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to David Young from the Press Association, who's been listening to that and looking at the results as they've been coming in over the weekend. What are your impressions, David, after what we've heard so far in the programme?
I suppose the main takeaway is Sinn Féin's performance, and looking at over the last number of years, 2019 through to now, it's almost the transient nature of Sinn Féin support. It seems to have a lot of ebbs and flows, and that's, I suppose, in stark contrast to what we're familiar with, north of the border, where voter loyalty seem to be more fixed and people stay with their parties, and there's a more defined loyalty here in regard, and obviously the constitutional question is more of an issue up here.
Although Sinn Féin have had problems in the past, I mean, witness what happened in Foyle at the last general election, for example.
Indeed, but I think what Sinn Féin has managed to do when it's been successful is it's managed to sort of galvanise and coalesce the post-crash disaffected voter base that doesn't, has sort of rejected the main traditional parties, but it's been able to do that on issues where it's easier to bring everyone with you in terms of housing, in terms of health. But as John touched on, in terms of migration, that's an issue that splits that voter base. So there will be people on the left that take a very, very different view from people on the right. And from Sinn Féin's perspective, it's very difficult to bring those together with you. And hence, we've seen sort of the fracturing of the Sinn Féin vote in the local elections.
OK, we've not got a lot of time left here, but I want to just get your thoughts on our own election campaign here north of the border. And there are big challenges for each and every one of the main parties, of course, really significant challenges, and the possibility of seats changing hands this time round in the way which we've not necessarily seen in the recent past.
Yeah, I mean, this election, I think, will be fascinating. There's probably about 5, 6, 7 seats where you really think it could be on a knife edge in terms of who wins the seat. And I suppose it's been a slow burner to date. That's sort of reflective maybe of the fact that the election was sprung on the parties, and maybe also reflective of the relative lack of resources. We don't have campaign markings every day, so for instance, but I think the interest will ramp up in terms of the manifestos, which you might see in the weeks ahead. And I suppose the real focus might be in the manifestos is particularly in terms of the DUP. How will they articulate their change in position in regard to the Safeguarding the Union command paper? How will that manifest itself in terms of what they outlined to voters in their manifesto? Yeah, the intra-unionist battle is going to be fascinating, in the role of the TUV and Jim Allister as well. Of course, all of that we will be discussing in a lot more detail over the next few weeks. David, for now, thanks very much. We'll talk to you again a bit later in the programme. Now, we all know about the tough budgets that are the order of the day at Stormont, but the news on the social housing budget shocked everyone. Building for just 400 homes will get underway this year, a fraction compared to the last several years. In a moment, we'll hear from Seamus Leahy, the Chief Executive of the Federation of Housing Associations. But first, here are the thoughts of the Deputy Chair of the Communities Committee, Ciara Ferguson, on hearing the news.
Once again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm quite shocked in relation to the house build figures. Gravely concerned. And this is not a good news story today, particularly for our housing associations. And I know many members have been out with our housing associations that are very keen and are working really, really hard to invest their time and resources in the development and building social and affordable homes for people. We're conscious of the waiting list. And then I'm also gravely concerned homelessness is on the rise. So it's reiterating the core need for housing to be seen as a priority in the programme for government, and particularly the implementation of the housing supply strategy urgently needs to be brought forward, and likewise revitalisation of the housing urgently needs to be brought forward.
Ciara Ferguson, and Seamus Leahy is with me now. Welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us. Can I just ask you, first of all, how many homes were you expecting the housing associations to start building this year?
Well, for this year, we were hoping for 2,000 minimum, and that was the Minister's aim as well. When we heard the news about the difficult budget this year, I think the expectation was in a difficult year, we'd be building a minimum 800 homes, and that was a really bad year considering. So the news on Thursday, I think, was a devastating blow to the sector.
Yeah. So it's half of what you thought the worst case scenario might be, in fact.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just talk us through what the implications are potentially for the sector and, of course, for the individuals who would have been hoping to move into the new homes that now are not being built.
Well, at the moment, the waiting list is growing huge. It's 47,000 now. For the first quarter of this year, we had 850 new applicants on the waiting list. So we're going to be building less than half the number of homes, even for the amount of people that joined the waiting list in 3 months of this year. So there's a social and economic impact. There's a lot of people, of the 47,000, 35,000 people are deemed in housing stress. Homelessness levels, the use of temporary accommodation is at record levels here in Northern Ireland. So this has implications for education, health, the housing executive, but also for housing associations as well, because suddenly we have a pipeline of work that has just disappeared.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to set it out in very straightforward terms for people, effectively what you're saying is that as far as dealing with housing need is concerned in Northern Ireland, we are chasing a moving target.
Exactly, yeah, and the most vulnerable people here are going to suffer. There's a lot of people who are hoping to get a home, and let's face it, a home is one of the most fundamental aspects of life here, And there's a lot of people that are going to be extremely disappointed.
There is a monitoring round coming up. We know that the department has said that it's going to ask for additional funds as part of that process. I think the figure of £180 million was mentioned. The difficulty, of course, is that there are huge needs elsewhere, as we know, in health and education, in infrastructure, in justice, and all of the other executive departments. So while there may be a very solid case and a very solid moral case, there are many other cases competing with it.
There's many, yeah, but I think the hit here is it's a huge hit. It's an 80% cut to the budget on last year. We had £156 million in grant last year. It was £186 million the year before. So it's an 80% cut. And the beauty of the way the housing associations build homes here is that for every £100 we get from government and grant, we're able to leverage an additional £84 from private finance. So in terms of the public purse and value for money from government, it makes sense. It's a good model. So I think we've taken a bigger hit than what a lot of other sectors have taken here.
Yeah, you have to have that money in the first place, though.
Exactly. We can't borrow more money than what we get from government on this for building social housing.
We've just been talking to a politician during an election campaign in which the issue of housing has been very much to the fore. We know how much the housing issue, along with other key issues, is critical in the politics of the Republic of Ireland. To what extent do you think our politicians, Seamus, here in Northern Ireland, understand the scale of the challenge that you and others within the sector are facing as far as housing is concerned?
I think the politicians do get it. You know,
They do get it.
They do. They understand. Every politician, both in MPs and MLAs and councillors, have told me housing is the #1 issue on the doorsteps and in constituency offices. The New Decade, New Approach deal signified safe, sustainable housing as a core output of that. But also the Executive's homeless strategy up to 2027 outlines as well that this is a priority for the Executive. So almost the budget is contradicting two of the key fundamental outputs that the Executive wants to deliver.
Well, what you think the Executive wants to deliver, because of course we don't have a programme for government. And we could see precisely to what extent this Executive values the issue if we actually saw that programme for government, but it seems to keep being
We're still waiting
kicked
for
into
that.
the ditch.
And we've actually asked ourselves and other groups involved with housing and homelessness have asked actually for a standalone outcome for housing, which has never been the case for Northern Ireland. And that's just because of the housing crisis we're facing.
So you've said very, very clearly there, and I'm sure politicians will thank you for it, that you think that they get it. The evidence that you see is that they do get the seriousness of the situation. But the question still continues to be, what can they do about it, even if they want to do something about it? I mean, you joined 3 other housing and homelessness organisations to write to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister. Do you feel you got any purchase from that?
I think we get words at the moment. What we need is the actions. And I think the politicians...
Isn't that always the case?
It's always the case here. And it's always... We've got so many people are fighting for basically a smaller amount of money now. And we've got to get... But the impact here with housing is that this will have a big impact on health, on education, but it's the amount of money that we're spending on temporary accommodation here. The Housing Executive are having to spend. So there's a lot of factors here that if people don't have, you know, a place to call home, that impacts their health, their well-being, support and services in the community. So this will actually cost probably the Executive more money in the long run.
Yeah, you may well be able to push this issue up the Stormont agenda in the years to come, and politicians have done that successfully, clearly in the Republic of Ireland, though it does tend to tie in with the scale of the problem whenever that happens. The question is what happens in the meantime. I mean, you may find yourself in a very different situation in a couple of years' time where politicians really are talking about this, and it is high up in a programme for government. But there's an awful lot of water to go under the bridge between now and then. That's the problem.
And the problem with building houses, it's not like turning a tap off and on. Once we stop construction, the land is sitting there, the land goes elsewhere, and you just simply can't turn it on because the construction companies, this whole supply chain goes elsewhere. And then if the money suddenly did appear next year or the year after in a budget, we have to scale up to start building because we really need to be building at a bare minimum 2,200 homes a year here to make any impact at all. We haven't hit those targets in years.
Just in a sentence, is the glass half full, Seamus, or is the glass half empty?
I think at the moment, for a lot of people in the sector, it feels empty at the moment, simply because of the funding issue. It's way worse than what anyone expected, and we need action. We need money to be found to get this, because I think this problem is going to get worse and worse, because we're seeing the homelessness levels rise, and I think basically we're kicking the can down the road on this.
Okay. Seamus Leheny, as ever, thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us. Just time for a final word with David now. It's another good example, isn't it, David, of how the Stormont budget is struggling hugely to cope with the number of demands being placed upon it.
Indeed, and I think what Seamus has said there is sort of further evidence that, if proof were needed, that the return of devolution and the return of Stormont has not been in any way a panacea for the problems facing public services in Northern Ireland. In terms of the problems with fundings, they still exist, and they still will exist because, even if Labour, which is looking likely to get into power, that will not be associated with some major splurge in terms of public spending, and there won't be a major windfall from Barnett consequences as a consequence of that. So, the executive is now coming down to the decisions are going to have to be made in regard to this. Either it's the continued slow erosion of public services, which we're sort of witnessing at the moment, or they're going to have to secure a significant reform of the funding model, potentially from a new Labour government, or, which is the continued discussion we have here, there maybe have to be some grasping of the nettle in terms of revenue raising.
Yeah.
Because
and that's the
where's
thing
the money going to come from otherwise?
You and I and many other journalists talk to politicians, and always they have an answer for that, which generally involves shying away from it. Let's be absolutely honest. There are not too many politicians who are putting their hands up to say this is the solution to the problem.
Indeed, but the state of public services and regard to the issues, I mean, all the departments, they all have competing problems. You could look at justice, PSNI officers, obviously education. They're trying to deal with educational underattainment. They've got the problems with the health service are obviously very well known and well publicised. So every department has its problems, and there's going to be a certain point where, what do the public say in terms of, when it comes to voting, not in obviously the general election, but in future elections, people are going to reach a point where they say enough is enough. We need to fix these problems.
It would be good to get some kind of handle on just how seriously the politicians at Stormont take this issue and some of the other issues we've touched upon as well. And we would know that when we saw a programme for government, and still there is no sign of it.
Well, indeed, and it seems to be, every week there's a different reason why it's not being produced, but hopefully we will see that in the coming months once the general election is passed. And I think at that point, if there's a new government in place, I think we then come into a new dynamic in terms of where Stormont's funding goes from there.
Okay, David, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, as ever. That is it for today. I'll be back with 3 more general election constituency profiles in our latest Red Lines podcast on Wednesday, and that'll be available on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. And do join me for The View on Thursday night, when we'll have the latest in our ongoing series of party leaders' interviews. This week it's the turn of the Alliance Party's Naomi Long. That's at 10:40 on BBC One. And all our previous interviews are, of course, already available on BBC iPlayer. And so far, that's Colm Eastwood, Doug Beattie and Jim Allister. For now, though, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.